And we are recording at the Chemung Valley History Museum, 415 East Water Street, Elmira, New York. I'm Patricia Lynch, a museum member and volunteer. I will be speaking with Marie Dolan, who resides in Elmira at Ferndale Drive. Marie is a World War II veteran who served in the Marine Corps from June 43 to January 46. And she will share her experiences and memories of that period with us, and also her post-war history. So, Marie, why don't you begin with when you entered service?
I was working in a defense plant in the office, and I was kind of a happy-go-lucky person. I had taken a few college courses, but didn't really want to amount to much of anything. And I was joking always, and I lived with a sister and brother-in-law because I was raised on a farm in northern New York where there wasn't too much opportunity for work, and so I came down to stay with them. And my brother-in-law was a veteran of World War I, and he was been badly wounded, and he'd been a Marine. And so when it came out that there was the Marine Corps was going to accept women, I said, oh gee, I'd like to join, with just not even meaning it, of course. And he said, well, they wouldn't take you, and that's when it all started. And so I painted myself into a corner by applying and so on, and the next thing I knew, I was called to go to Washington, D.C. To be transferred to Camp Jejune for boot camp.
What age
and
were you then?
I was about 23 or 2, I can't remember now. Well, I cried all the way to Washington. I didn't really want to go in at all, but I had sort of put myself in a position with friends saying, oh, you know, I'm joining, and it was really quite daring to join the service at that period. It was not considered quite nice. And so anyway, I had done it, and I had to go, and I'd hear girls around me saying, isn't this wonderful? And I'd think, oh my goodness, what kind of a home did you have? I couldn't understand how they could like it, and I admired most one girl who escaped. Camp Jejune is vast. And I don't know how she got there, and she managed to get back to Ohio, and I wouldn't have been able to find my own barracks, much less to get back to Ohio at that point. And I thought she did rather well, but she was up before the battalion, and it was, I don't know whatever happened to her. So boot camp was very, very rigorous. They tried to make it as much like the men's as possible. And I think that we did learn a lot about our potential, because it was so, they would say, okay, fall out and go in, take a shower, and be back in 3 minutes, you know, that kind of thing. But we really shaped up, and we worked hard and got through that. And then I didn't know what to ask for an assignment. We did have a choice, supposedly. But 25 of us were chosen to go to Georgia State College for Women in Milledgeville, Georgia. And we lived in the old governor's mansion, and they were condensing a course in they called it storekeeping. Actually, it was accounting paymaster was basically what we did, learned. And of the 25, I've really been puzzled about this. There were 3 girls who had nervous breakdowns, and that seemed like a rather high number to me anyway.
So they left the service?
I don't know what happened to them. But anyway, they really very definitely had nervous breakdowns. You know, couldn't speak, that kind of thing. And we had very little liberty. We went into, I think, At one time, maybe we had one weekend that we could go into the hotel and stay in Atlanta. And, but pretty much we were not acquainted with the South, any of us, or most of us. And so we were fascinated with the culture. It was so different from the Yankees in the North. And they loved to take us and show us the town. The biggest thing they could show you would be the cemetery and they talked about the Civil War as though it was yesterday. And when they were talking about the war, you didn't know which one they meant. But it was very gracious, and we ate at white tablecloths and that kind of thing. It was, if you didn't look under the cloth to see the bugs, it was fine. So anyway, at the end, now there were waves there. We were all told when we were at Georgia that we must come out first, and we did. We had to have the highest grades. The Marines are always told that when they're going to compete. Then when I went from private to private first class, which would mean about $5 or $6 more a month, but for a girl in the waves, she would become a non-com, which would be equal to a sergeant, you see. So promotions were very different between the different services.
What was your pay?
Well, I finally worked up to sergeant for $78, but before that it was $50. And
a month, you mean?
A month, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we got our orders, and we were all able to go home and first, and then we had to report to El Toro, El Toro, California. And quite a few of the girls who were in Starkeeper School with me went there, and the other half went to the Mojave Desert. And we lived in barracks in El Toro for the room I was in had 88 girls.
So El Toro was an air station?
Marine Corps Air Station.
A Marine Corps Air Station in Santa Ana, California.
Santa Ana, yes. It was only about 7 miles from Laguna and it was halfway between San Diego and Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. It was a great place to be stationed. And so they didn't have, well, the recreation for people on the base wasn't that good. As far as probably we would have liked lectures or something, but they had entertainers from Hollywood came down and did dances every Saturday night. Rudy Valley came just about every other week or so, and we had Dan Topping was our recreation officer, and he was married to Sonia Henney, if you remember. And so he had friends in Hollywood. He could arrange for any of them, and we didn't really want any of them anymore. I saw enough of Bob Hope that I'm tired of him yet. And sometimes if they didn't have, for Johnny Mercer, if they didn't have a crowd, they'd make some of us stay overnight on Friday night if we were supposed to have Liberty. They'd make us stay there to hear Johnny Mercer. We used to call them, they were called the Pied Pipers, I think, and we called them the pickpockets because we didn't like it that they stole our time. Joe Stafford was a singer in that group, I think.
So you were exposed to quite a few celebrities, though.
So, a great many of them, but we didn't have much to do with them. You know, we were really, if you got sunburned, if you went to Laguna Beach was our favorite place to go on Sunday. They had a lovely beach, and that really was getting away from the military, and but we had many opportunities, but we did not trust the people in Los Angeles, the entertaining crowd. If we got sunburned in Laguna, you were penalized. It was like getting a venereal disease. It's the same category. You belong to the government, and you must be very, very careful. And the uniform, on the other hand, was a great protection. So we didn't have much to do with them purposely. and weren't even tempted. Of course, we weren't very sophisticated. Now, one thing, and I say the uniform was great protection. And we had a 5-day pass after I'd been there about a year, and this other girl and I, my bunkie was, most of the girls I was with had better education than I. She had her master's from the University of Michigan, and she said, I'd love to go up and see where Steinbeck wrote about in Monterey and so on. And so we set out hitchhiking, decided we'd go as far as we could, and when we ran out of money, which we didn't have much, we would turn around and come back. Well, we got to San Francisco, and we went to, I remember we went to see HMS Pinafore, and we ate crab, Dungus crab. It was that we liked it so much we got kind of sick on it, and we really thoroughly enjoyed San Francisco, and took the train. Had just enough money to get the train back to the base and that was very sad. She was a perfect person to go with, and we did visit where they wrote where Steinbeck wrote about Tortilla Flat, and I can't remember all the other things that we went, but we saw the usual things that you see in San Francisco. There was a nice train that goes along the coast that is really quite pretty. The ride is pretty.
When you were granted leave, you were free to go, you know.
Well, you had papers. You had papers saying what time you had to be back and so forth, and we didn't have a lot of time off. As far as now, what happened? We couldn't go in. We were treated like little kids in many respects. You couldn't go into town on a weeknight without having a permission, and so most of us signed up to go to Santa Ana Junior College. I got in 22 hours of college going into Santa Ana Junior College. It was an interesting thing for me.
What kind of studies did you pursue there?
Oh, we took history and English. I don't think anything besides history and English, but we took lots of different courses in those fields.
Now, were they paid for by the government?
I think we paid $2 a course or something like that. The teacher told me that she could tell the girls from the East because we had better backgrounds in education than the ones from California. California was very experimental back in the Depression years. And they didn't believe in teaching the alphabet, for example, and that kind of thing. I don't know how they ever filed anything. But the teachers were interesting, and I think well qualified. And that we'd go at least a couple nights a week into classes. And so then anyway, I was assigned to a supply office. Everything that was received, all materials received on the base went through our office. And so each one of us, not by any design, I don't think, each of us replaced not men, but three civil service workers, every Marine girl of the group that I came from. It took over a period of time. It was by attrition, one thing and another, but we could handle their work. They were not...
But were you serving alongside male Marines? How were you accepted as female?
All right, the male Marines be in and out with reports and that kind of thing. My immediate boss was a civilian, and there was a Navy officer that sat opposite him in the same office, or once there was a Marine officer. He was I never wanted to be an officer myself. In the Marine Corps, it's different. They're like house mothers. they don't really know the work at all. They just kind of sit around and boss, and they don't really get into things. Whereas by the time I had served there and the war ended, I had many offers for good jobs in California because I was acquainted with a lot of people in different companies.
And you had been promoted. When were you promoted to sergeant?
Well, not too soon. I remember being very disappointed because I think I don't remember when I made corporal, but I made sergeant. Probably I was there a year or so, but that was another thing. Most of the Marine officers you can depend on, but there was one woman who was in charge of us who was kind of a floozy, and she just had us put our names in a hat and draw, which none of us liked it. None of us liked it at all. We thought that in some way she ought to be able to figure that out a little better, or try to.
Marie, tell us about communicating back home. How about the people back home that didn't think you would enter the service?
Well, my father, just the only thing he ever said was, please don't stay out there when it's over with. And I did get home. We could come home for a $50 ticket if you were willing to take this awful train. And so after, I don't know how long it was, I made one trip home, and I remember making it in the month of May because I was living out in the desert. And the desert was pretty bleak, and I just wanted to see the greenery of New York State, and so I did come home, and when I was going back, there were a whole lot of mothers with babies headed for the West Coast to say goodbye to their men that were going to be going overseas. And they wanted them to see the children and that kind of thing. Well, another woman and I who didn't have any children, we worked all the way across, helping with these poor women, and I dreaded what would happen because you get into San Diego, you might not be able to sleep in anything but a tent. So they weren't, those that were going to surprise the men really worried me most of all. But anyway, I think it was in '45 that they wanted to make a movie, and Warner Brothers was to make the movie. I suppose it was a recruiting movie or something, but it was a regular movie that people would see in a theater. Andrea King had the lead, and I never heard of the man who was opposite her, and they made the movie So Proudly We Serve, and I wish the Marine Corps memorial people would find that movie. I'd like to see it again. I saw it several times years ago, but anyway.
Was it filmed on your base?
No, we were picked. Some of us were picked to go to Warner Brothers to be in the movie.
Okay.
And it was. We were fascinated with how you do it. We were in one dance scene it's supposed to be in the PX or whatever, rec hall anyway, and you had to put booties over your shoes so that they wouldn't make any noise, and the lights really made your makeup. They all put Max Factor on all of us, and it just dripped right off of our cheeks. But so they gave us tickets or chance to eat in the cafeteria. Well, the first couple days they let us, and of course we had our fill of gorgeous fruit salads and all sorts of lovely things, and we got to eavesdrop what the women were saying, and the one actress was saying, I don't know which one I would rather be seen with, this one or that one, and so forth, and we were quite surprised. As I say, we were kind of green, you know.
So the food was quite different than what you had back on the base.
Oh, believe me, yes, it wasn't as fattening for one thing. It was a meat and potatoes thing on the base, you know. And anyway, about the third day, they made a different chow line for us and didn't let us eat in the cafeteria because I guess we were breaking them. But I saw everybody. Barbara Stanwyck was the darling of that place, and then Ethel Barrymore was there, and I just saw all of them, and it was very, very interesting.
So the name of the movie again was
So Proudly We Serve.
So Proudly We Serve.
Uh-huh.
And what studio was it?
Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers.
So that was quite an experience.
Yeah.
So that and my trip to San Francisco were two big highlights. The other was to go. We could go down to Mexico on a Sunday, but you had to be back across the border by 4 o'clock. We never saw the bullfights. I wanted to see one of them. Probably wouldn't have liked it, but I wanted to see one, and. That was one thing, and we did learn one thing about going down to Mexico. You bought a bottle of Chanel for $5. It was just colored water. It wasn't really we fell for it. They sold nylons that didn't last for the first afternoon, and but it wasn't. Tijuana was not as bad as it is. I saw it 20 years later, and believe me, at least it wasn't as crowded and awful as it is now. Let me see that. I think we ought to get up. I did make wonderful friends in the service, and I have kept in touch with them, with quite a number of them, and but when it was time to get out, I went back to Syracuse and enrolled at Syracuse University, where I did my undergraduate and graduate work. And
what city were you? I don't think we covered what city you were in when you officially entered the service.
I was in Syracuse.
It was at Syracuse.
Yeah,
that you
and
entered.
with a sister and brother-in-law. And that was where I went back, and but I went on to live on campus then. And that was a very, very interesting thing.
So I think then you actually went to school under the GI Bill, what they call the GI Bill?
Yes, and that every time they raised the allowance, or the university raised theirs, raised the cost. But it was that I loved those years. I graduated in 2.5 years. And then I got my master's, and I was in psychology, and I was Phi Beta Kappa, and I always think the Green Corps did make me more serious-minded and make me know your own potential.
Where were you the day the war ended? Were you still in the service?
I was in the office of the supply office at El Toro, and the worst part of the whole ordeal there was that you didn't know if it would ever end, and you'd think, well, gee, I'd like to get on to something else. And so we never got, I wish we had had more courses or lectures on what was going on, because we really didn't have any idea very much.
Compared to today when we just saw a war on television.
Yes.
You weren't knowledgeable. Well, the information was from newspapers and radio in that time.
That's right, that's right.
So how long after the war ended did you get discharged?
Oh, let's see, I was discharged in January. What day was the war ended? In August or something, wasn't it? So
following January 46th then.
Yeah. I think you had to have points, didn't you?
Points,
there was. I don't know whether I had to.
You had to
stay that long.
You had to qualify for discharge, or
I don't remember much about that, but I think that it was about the same as the other girls did. And I really have a great deal of respect for the way Marine Corps operates. We do have some ex-Marines like Oswald who seem to be affected in a different way, but for the most part, I think in the Marine Corps you learn your own potential and realize surprise yourself, really.
So you kept up in contact with some of the people who were in service with you, maintain those relationships?
Yes, I have one girl in Minnesota that I get in touch with. I may even call her once in a blue moon because of course, we're all getting old now.
So, have you, do you belong to any veterans organizations?
Well, I belong to the Marine Corps. Let me see if I can think of the name of it. I'm Senior Vice Commandant of the Southern Tier Chapter of the Marine Corps League of the State of New York.
Okay.
That's kind of, but anyway, what we do, we're a very small detachment in, actually the Southern Tier meets in Bath. And we have a very good time together now. They want Bill, and Bill was my husband was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and he's entitled to visit any military station in the country, and so we visited about 5 this past year, and that was a very they want us to come to Bath and tell them about it. So we're going to go in June and tell them about it.
But we backtrack a little. You came out of the service as a single person.
Yeah, right.
And then you married at some point, or your first marriage.
Yes, I was coming across the country on the train, and I really wanted to put everything military behind me and think about what I was going to do and all the decisions that would come up. And there was this really good-looking Marine he was a platoon sergeant. That's quite a rank in the Marine Corps. Everybody wants to be a gunnery sergeant. And he had slash marks and lots of medals and all this sort of thing. And he was going up to get a pillow while I was sitting with a young boy who was really a pest, just a nuisance. And so I stuck out my foot. The Marine men always treated us very well, but kind of standoffish a little bit. Unless if you needed them. If you asked them for help, if you were off someplace and you wanted to, you didn't know which way to turn or where to go for something, they would always be very nice. Well, so I tripped him. And then I asked him all the dumb questions like where you been, where you stationed, where you headed, and all this sort of thing. And he was sort of shy, very shy, really. And I found out afterwards that he hadn't talked to a woman like that for years. He'd been aboard ship, and he was in all the major battles practically in the Pacific. And so he said he was afraid of what he'd say. Well, anyway, I found out, finally this other fellow went away, and he sat down with me, and we were both headed for Syracuse, and we both had married sisters in Syracuse, and he was headed for her house, and I was headed for my sister's house. So then in those days they used to make you team up for a taxi, so we were put in the same taxi. And so I thought probably he'd call me in a day or two. He didn't help me with all my luggage or anything because he had practically everything he could bring home with him, he did. And so he had too much to carry, but he did help me carry it up onto the porch, and so he knew where I lived. And as I say, I thought he'd probably call me. but he didn't. He was home 40 days, and he didn't call me until he got back to Philadelphia. And he wasn't discharged yet. And so he was waiting to be discharged down there. And then he started calling constantly. And he came up all the time I was in Syracuse University. He came up weekends, and he got me through math. He had never taken that math, but he got me through it. And a math course that I had trouble with. And we had a very nice marriage and 2 sons. He died in 1994. And so I met another military man that I liked. And so I married again last fall.
Happily.
Yes, very happily. I was surprised. Now, I mentioned that we were able to visit all those different bases.
Yes,
like
that was
Navy,
recent.
Coast Guard, all of them. And seeing women with rifles was jolting to me.
So you were comparing your
Yes.
your experience in training with what they're doing today.
With what they're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, the bases are different too. I don't know what they used to be, but at Camp Jejune, for example, when I was down there, it's like a city. They have big high school and middle schools and daycare centers and all the things that I think it's almost a different culture entirely. I wonder, and now of course they're all very qualified. Nobody wants just a volunteer. They want somebody who knows, who is willing to get down and study and really learn to be very able. And so now I think that they want to get along with a smaller.
So your bases in the 40s were primitive, are you saying,
Well,
compared
yes.
to what they are today, and without any of the many facilities of daycare?
Yeah, you wouldn't have any of those things, no. Really.
You just have basics.
Yes, very basics. Just almost like barn-like rooms was.
And you say that you became aware of the differences of the qualifications to enter?
Yes, I don't
service.
think they'll take just anyone. I think that they have to be, of course it's a great privilege because they'll put you through any kind of training you want. And I think the pay's better. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's much better. And these people, you run into them. Well, sometimes when we were, it was different with us. We'd eat in the officers' mess, and but they're very polite and nice to us there. They seem to, they apparently they have. They're taught to be polite too, I guess, to behave properly. Well, I think there's that discipline that shows with. Mm-hmm. And also the integration is wonderful. The black and white work together and seem to eat together and be just as friendly as can be. And
well, compare that to what you saw in the 40s.
Oh well, and the only thing the blacks could do in Georgia was mess duty or possibly some driving jobs. And close order drill, the people thought they were cute because they were more graceful or something. Incredible bias. And one of the things that bothered me terribly, we went from Milledgeville to Atlanta on a bus, and they talk about the blacks had to go to the back of the bus. Well, that's not a good description. The blacks have to get off, and then if there's any room, get back on after the whites get on. And so that meant that any old lady who was lame and sick or something, she had to get off and then get back on.
And when you witnessed this, it made you feel bad?
Of course it did. Well, of course we didn't understand that.
Yeah, and they had not been exposed to
I'll
it.
tell you this, the black help at Georgia State College for Women, the black help didn't care too much for the Yankee girls. I suppose they thought we'd get them in trouble. They liked the Southern girls that were in there. They knew what they were dealing with. I don't know, since after my marriage, my first marriage, it didn't have too much to do with anything to do with the service for a number of years. But then after my husband died, I went into volunteer work for the Marine Corps League, and I've done calling on housebound people, the veterans who are housebound, and women as well. And there's a women's group that I've met with occasionally. That's more a social group. I haven't done that as much. And I think the privileges for veterans are very good. My first husband is buried in Arlington, and I think he would have been very proud of that. So I don't think there's too much else I can tell you.
Well, you've certainly told us a lot, Marie, and shared an awful lot of your memories with us. You're free to add anything more that you can recall. You did say you are going to donate a book. Can you tell us about the book that you're going to bring in to Heather?
Yeah, and then there might be some snapshots of groups that I have, and I just haven't gotten them out, but I will do it.
And this was a book that was put together?
It would be what in high school would be a yearbook.
Like a yearbook. Only
it's like that.
Boot camp.
Boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has pictures of our group, and I'm awfully sorry that we didn't put more addresses on, because there are girls I've thought about a great deal and haven't the vaguest idea where they are. I asked down at the Women's Memorial. I went to that when they opened the Women's Memorial in Washington, D.C. I went down on with a veteran group, and that was a gorgeous day. And but I asked about different names because people can register there. Mm-hmm. But the ones I was looking for, I didn't find.
Were your instructors included in that book?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. In fact, we had 2 drill instructors in boot camp that my husband later had, the Marine, Mr. Doyle, had aboard ship.
So they went off to active duty.
Yeah. I don't know of anything else I can tell you.
None of the women Marines in your time of service were allowed to be assigned to active duty, isn't that so?
Oh, they couldn't go. Finally, they made it that they could go to Hawaii, and a couple of girls I knew asked to go, and did very well over there. One was head of a radio station, last I knew. So there was opportunity there, but my father had told me not to go, and although I wasn't probably the best disciplined, I couldn't do it when he didn't want me to.
So even though you didn't really want to or intend to really enlist in the service, did you ever regret it?
No, I'd regretted it for the first 6 weeks. But I couldn't understand how anybody could like it. But, get up at 5 o'clock, be doing calisthenics outdoors, and when it's cold and clammy, and it's not that much fun.
But after your initial adjustment to it, you accepted it?
Oh, the fact, yes, and you can feel pretty good about yourself if you got through it.
Certainly you could. Well, it's an important time in your life, and important historically. We do hope that you bring your book in to us, Marie, and appreciate taking the time to share your memories and your recollections of your experience in the United States Marines.
Thank you.
Good.